feel like the highlights on my glasses make me look like an alien. Change your life with the power positivity from these self-help books. Brought to you by Audible. Just kidding. My channel's new and it probably has traffic patterns similar to that of spam in the eyes of the YouTube algorithm, so here I am living in the dark, dusty corners of the internet. Hi. Please subscribe so I'm not eternally squatting in the Chinese pooping position next to a dead spider.
I traded all my friends for books and the internet. Oh shit, my winner yet. Look quick, she a winner yet.
Oh god, I feel like I'm about to make a middle school book review in video form, and I thought I was past this already. Actually though, I have this very healthy level of skepticism towards self-help books, and I really see them as long-form narrations of common sense, but I've been spending a lot of time reading them now that every YouTuber and their mother has been recommending them. Also procrastination, so I feel a sense of accomplishment even though I've just spent hours rereading refurbished advice that I've seen multiple times before. All that said, I do sometimes come across a passage that speaks to me on a deeper and more meaningful level. So today I'll be covering some of my takeaways from the books that I've been recommended, their key points, and whether or not I actually recommend them. Told from the eyes of a cynic who, on one hand, believes in this romanticized view of success, and on the other hand, believes that luck is a random phenomenon and self-help books are written by people with unconventional stories who have stumbled upon this magical luck and is retroactively retelling their stories as a reproducible strategy in order to earn money. Hashtag capitalism. Quick note, I read a blog that talked about the 3 types of non-fictional books. So narrative, tree, and branch. Going with this branch theme, here's to climbing the tree of knowledge so that we can become the greatest of all time. Welcome! I'm Elle, your host on this natural sunlight lit, early afternoon, not late night talk show, complete with artificial laughter after my jokes to emphasize their badness. The first book on my list is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and the title pretty much summarizes what the book is about. So to distill the book down into 2 things, I'd say it's about developing independence as well as developing interdependence. So to develop independence, as in develop yourself, you want to basically take action and to have goals and priorities. And to develop interdependence, basically be empathetic. Try to understand the other person's point of view, be self-aware, don't project. I think the takeaway here is habits take time to develop and it's important to do something. This book also cemented one of my most important lessons that I learned in college, which is that someone else's success is not your failure. In high school, I used to think that someone else winning would mean that I've lost. And I had such a zoomed in view of the world that in fact that was kind of the case. But when I went to college, I realized that there was so much more to life than what I saw in high school. I don't know, it really sucked growing up in this stereotypical Asian community where the Asian parents would just pit their children against each other, and it took college for me to basically heal from that mindset. Anyway, the book basically exposed what I call my capitalistic sin, which is basically guilt that's associated with having habits that make me not a productive enough person in society. Okay, I know that people say this book is life-changing, and while I can't give that endorsement, I do think that the writing is clear enough, so it's at least worth skimming through. My next book is The Slight Edge. The slight edge is defined as the understanding that small positive actions will result in compounded positive effects over time. So basically, success is accumulation of small wins every day. The entire book is a pep talk on that one message with anecdotes sprinkled in like glitter on a stripper. Would I recommend the book? I don't know. I'd say that it's made me pay more attention to what I do at the moment versus focusing on what I want in the grand scheme of life. The book emphasizes that it's the little things we do today that separates us tomorrow. And I don't just mean the boy who lied about his penis size. I mean, it's the details from the present that will make the most significant difference in the future. And it's nice to know that the extra effort will be counted. But yeah, I don't think the idea is very profound. Basically, I would read it for the same reason why I would pay to go to a running class, which is to find motivation where there is none. Let's talk about the third book, which is Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is the last in the habits category, and it's also my favorite of the 3 books. If you only want to read one, it should be this one because, let's admit it, all self-help books are the same, just like fashion influencers on Instagram. I'm kidding, but this one was written clearly, as in James Clear. Anyway, the book talks about how people too often make the mistake of trying to change their life all at once and how instead they should change their life incrementally with one habit at a time. So James basically wrote helpful tips on how to create good habits, follow those habits, and eliminate bad habits. He also happens to talk about the law of 1%, which is basically the slight edge. I also got 2 important takeaways from this book, and the first one is what he calls the plateau of latent potential. So this talks about how people think progress is linear, but in fact it's generally non-linear, and there's this uncanny valley where people expect the results to be here, but the results are actually here. Anyway, I think it's important to note that people do think linearly. Like the president, who thinks that coronavirus cases will decrease with decreased testing. So my second takeaway was that people often define their habits by their identity. So for example, a smoker trying to quit will generally have better luck if they first identify as a non-smoker. I think this is completely tangential, but I just realized that people all too often, I think, attach too much of who they are and what they do to who they believe they are. I mean, maybe if the students in the computer science community didn't identify as tech bros, they'd start showering or something. Anyway, I think there's a surprising amount of useful information in the book, and there's a good mix of theories and scientific experiments as well as examples. It's less of a pep talk and more of a TED talk, if that makes sense. The next book is called Peak. And apparently the last time that I peaked was in 7th grade when I got a 3rd place ribbon for the 4x100 meter relay. But anyway, the book is about the science of expertise. So Malcolm Gladwell popularized this 10,000 hour rule for doing something in order to become an expert at that thing. And apparently that's the amount of hours that I spent online messaging my crushes in middle and high school to no avail. Instead, the book talks about deliberate practice in order to become an expert at something. Practicing is broken down into 3 different categories: naive, purposeful, and deliberate. Naive is doing something repeatedly. So like, practice doesn't make perfect, but practice makes permanent. Purposeful practice is basically focused practice that's a little bit painful, but has feedback and also well-defined and specific goals. So the last type of practice, which is also the pinnacle of practice, is called deliberate practice. And this basically builds off of purposeful practice. But basically here you want to develop your mental representations of a task. So here you want to build on your skills by following well-established training techniques guided by a coach that will help you create these effective mental representations. So Peak is a good introduction to deliberate practice, basically saying that it's hard work. It's also inspirational to look at the roads of the greats, although the book is less prescriptive and more descriptive, so it's not as actionable. It has a similar thesis to my next book, which I prefer more. So the next book that I read is called Mastery, which is basically about what it takes to become a master in something. It's definitely much more immersive and also has better storytelling than Peak. In that sense, it reads more like a book and less like an elongated bullet point list. I don't know if this is just me, but whenever I read a book, I kind of place myself in the story. And for this story, I saw myself as an apprentice during the Renaissance times trying to become a master. Hopefully without stealing cadavers in order to learn more about the human anatomy. And hopefully also without the racism and sexism that comes with the Renaissance. Okay, anyway, the theme here is that you can do almost anything with enough time. Like become a political leader with seemingly 0 qualifications. It also contains these nuggets of wisdom, like heuristics to find your life calling, or how to find the ideal apprenticeship, and the fact that everyone has these 7 deadly sins like envy and obsession and conformism, and how to deal with things like that. Also a random thought while reading this book, but I realized that self-help books in this productivity/habits genre are basically the antithesis of what they actually teach. So they basically tell us to do something, but they exist so that we don't actually do something, but instead are reading about what we should do. Maybe that's just a necessary evil to help us gain knowledge. Anyway, so I think Mastery felt more like a fictional book compared to the other self-help books that I read, and this just made it more engaging, at least personally. Also, this book preached the "they can do it, why can't I" mentality, and I think that's kind of inspirational. Next we have How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. If this isn't the granddaddy of self-help books, I don't know what is. This is also the most demanding book that I've ever read. Like, it tells you to read each chapter twice before going on to the next one, review this book each month, among other things, which as a lazy and skeptical student, I most certainly did not do. But also as a skeptic, I will tell you that I did not enjoy this book. I think it does a good job of exploring at least a facet of human nature, or at least asserting it. For example, he says that humans have this list of needs, and the one that's not fulfilled is the desire to be important. So Freud called this the desire to be recognized. Although that was one very deeply sexually disturbed man, if I do say so myself. Anyway, it seemed like the moral of the story was that humans are self-interested, and in order to make someone else like you should make them feel as if you're also genuinely interested in them. Clearly not those creepy middle-aged LinkedIn men who DM me. The book also talks about how making friends boils down to being sincere in not only how you present yourself, but also in your interest in other people. So yeah, an overall message of this book is to keep your ego in check. And I can just hear Kirsty Godso screaming, "Just get over yourself." That was not a good New Zealand accent. I have to say, I was quite surprised that the book kind of paints a pessimistic view of people. Like, Carnegie portrays people as vain and self-interested and egotistical, which not completely untrue. Anyway, I feel the same way about this book as I do The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I can see why they're both popular. They're both clearly written and can be easily condensed into actionable lists. Or maybe it's just because their covers look alike. The book is definitely worth a skim. Although you can ask, have I won any friends since I read this book? Or have I influenced people ever since I read this book? So maybe not the most effective book. The next book that I read is called Nonviolent Communication. It's seriously written for people who haven't gone through emotional puberty yet. So it basically talks about communicating in a way that's both compassionate and authentic. The 4 basic components of nonviolent communication are 1, to make an observation, 2, to recognize how you feel about what you observed, 3, to know what you need based on how you feel, and 4, to ask for what you need in concrete terms. Okay, some guidelines here. Don't make comparisons like every single Asian I eat every time they see me, and also don't be so demanding. Like, I thought my cat was demanding until strangers started messaging me online. The book also touches on this idea of projection, as do a lot of other books on my list. Basically, you say one thing, but we think that you mean something based on what we think and what we think you think. I guess projection creates this toxic cycle of thinking that we understand someone when we don't actually, and reacting suboptimally as a result. I actually don't think it hurts to read this book because more often than not, when we communicate, I feel like we come across more aggressive than we actually mean to. So the next book on my list is Getting to Yes, and this is about successful negotiation in 6 steps. So there are 4 basic principles that the book talks about. The first one being separate the people from the problem. Like, you want to solve the problem and not the people. 2 is basically to focus on options and oppositions, which helps lead to a compromise. 3 is to invent options for mutual gain, which is basically to compromise. For example, oh, some people on the right don't believe in the coronavirus, and oh, some people on the left want to protest without masks even during a global pandemic? Well, why not reopen our country even though the numbers haven't been improving? The 4th tactic is to use objective criteria, basically judge with a fair standard. The takeaways here are we want to try to get away from because they want X, I think they think Y. Again, there are usually ways to mutually benefit as long as we expand from this my way or the highway mindset. I'd recommend reading this book if you're into negotiation tactics. Here's a personal testimonial. Hello there. I wanted to see my ex. My ex kept saying no, so I decided to read this book and to employ these tactics. He said yes, getting to yes, yes. That's about as much creepy as I can do in a day. The next book is an interesting one. It's called All About Love by Bell Hooks. It was actually really intellectually arousing. And I know that sounds gross. Honestly, I thought it was going to regurgitate the vacuous cliches that I'm used to hearing.
No chance, no way, I won't say it, no, no.
You swoon, you sigh, why deny it? Oh,
It's too cliche, I won't say I'm in love.
Like, love is hard work. There's so many fish out in the sea. Just love yourself and someone will come along and find you. The reason you don't have love is because you haven't done enough to better yourself. The root of all problems stem from your childhood, which, okay, there was a little bit of. Anyway, the book made me think a lot because I'm kind of a hopeless romantic, but also because I think love, or the lack of love, is personal to each and every one of us. I mean, not only romantic love, but also familial love, spiritual love, any place where we can have love. Or, as Bell Hooks would like to argue, any place where we can love. So this book is all about love, written from an intersectional feminist point of view. It examines the effects of love and lovelessness across families, work, and society. And it also explores this desire for love in a culture that's cynical about and almost fearful of love. So a quote that really resonated with me is, "The heart of justice is truth-telling." So this quote talks about how we should be seeing ourselves and our society for how it is rather than how we want it to be or how we think it to be, and how we as a society need to commit to truth-telling, which is oddly pertinent in today's society where fake news is just as trendy as Justin Bieber before he hit puberty. This book also touches on greed and material wants, and this idea that women are considered desperate if they seek love. And I will add, why do men feel emasculated by committing to love? A little tangential, but I've always liked to ask people, would you rather love or be loved? Let me know in the comments below. So the book gets a little spiritual at times, which is great if that's a place where you experience love. But even if you're not religious, it's written in a poetic and insightful way that's helped me better understand faith. Okay, regardless, I think that we don't talk enough about love, even though it's something that almost all of us long for and are fascinated by. Except in songs and movies and books. Basically, anywhere except where it matters most. So my next book is Digital Minimalism, which is very relevant these days since my phone is my only form of social contact. So digital minimalism refers to a philosophy of technology use. Basically, we want to focus on carefully selected and optimized activities that support your values. The author argues that tech is not about its usefulness, but rather about the loss of autonomy when we use it. So some takeaways here. Basically, the book introduces Thoreau's new economics, which shifts costs from money to time. So basically, in order to get something, we're not exchanging just money, but also life. I feel like this book would be helpful if you feel loss of control digitally and you want to assert your dominance over the technologies in your life. But I suppose it's a jihad to be at constant battles with the pillars of capitalism, especially now that the corporate daddies have our data that's supposed to encapsulate all of our personalities. Okay, and I know that I live on the internet nowadays, but let's move from digital clutter to physical clutter. My next book is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, which is all about the art of tidying up, with tips and tricks on how to declutter and organize your home, which is very pertinent because I really need to move out of my New York City apartment. Basically, we've heard it all before. We only want to keep things that spark joy in our lives, and to severely pare down the steps, basically, we want to start by discarding and don't be distracted by nostalgia. So takeaways. There's something about attaching emotions and memories to inanimate objects as seen through our history.
This is one of those unforgettable paintings.
And there's something also about nostalgia that's hard to shake.
You know, it's a flaw in the romantic imagination of those people who find it difficult to cope with the present.
Maybe unhealthy mechanisms aside, I do feel that cleaning the physical space around me also removes some of my mental clutter, which does improve my life. Also, this is not the main theme in this book, but it is a theme in self-help books in general, which is the idea that we should be living life in the present and we shouldn't be held back by the past or the future. The book is all about learning to do without things that have marginal local benefits for global benefits, even though it's hard to lose something. Oh dear. I feel like I'm breaking up with someone. It is impressive how Marie Kondo made a living off of tidying, although I wasn't sure if they were lessons in tidying spaces or the non-existent boys in my life. So I'm finally out of self-help books to talk about, and if it wasn't painfully obvious by now, I'm still very wary about this genre of books. But anyway, I did learn something, and if you did too, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what books you like to read. And I'll see you soon.